So today we're going to be talking about Baal, or I should say Baal, and the religion of the ancient Canaanites. So that's the topic. So we're going to be talking about, uh, well, quite a few things today. So we're going to delve into the archaeology as well as the mythology of ancient Canaanite religion. So we will be talking about Baal, we'll be talking about El, the mistress, of course, or wife, Asherah. We'll be talking about Yamm and Lotan, the seven-headed dragon serpent, right? Slain by the fearsome Anat, a sister and wife of Baal in another form of the mythology, right? We will talk about Mot, the deathly prince, the god of sterility and the underworld. We'll be talking about Moloch quite a bit. But we have to have an understanding of the sequence of events that lead up. So I kind of want to capture ancient Canaanite religion, but I want to go through the Bronze Age a little bit, just kind of give an overview of the various epics so we kind of understand the context from within which these gods and goddesses operate, right? So let's start a little bit with the early Bronze Age Canaan. The early Bronze Age is from 3300 to 2100 BCE. So this is the Levant. Now, the Levant is there's lots of names for this region. So this region was known as Canaan. The same region was known as the Levant, but the Levant is a little larger area. So it includes not only what is today Israel and Palestine, but includes Lebanon and Syria and Jordan, a little bit of Egypt, and of course, you're going to have Western Mesopotamia, as well as Eastern Anatolia. So that's kind of the 11th area. That same region, of course, is understood as Palestine, the smaller area of Canaan, and then, of course, Israel. But anyway, let's go back here. So we're going to look into the Levant. So that means how I view it is that while when we talk about the Canaanites, and mostly we're talking about the geographical area that is today Israel and Palestine, the reality is the Canaanites were further up north. They go into what is now Lebanon and parts of Syria. So I'm going to include that those gods and goddesses in mythology because they all connect to the West Semitic gods and goddesses. Now, during the early Bronze Age, that's again 3300 to 2100, right? BCE, the Levant starts to be more occupied. Extensive settlements are founded during this period of time. You're going to have Hatzor and Megiddo and Gezer and Dan. Now, I know a lot about Tel Dan, so we'll tell Dan about it. Tel Dan is currently in the northern section of Israel. It's near the Golan Heights, and I've had a chance to be there. In fact, when I was at Claremont and I was studying under Tammy Snyder, archaeology, she's a very wonderful archaeologist. Her area was Tel Afar in the southern part. What she wanted me to do is study Tel Dan. And so I did extensive research of Tel Dan. And obviously, as I said before, I have had a chance to visit and see the site. So I will be mentioning this particular place as I go through the various stages of the Bronze Age. So at Tel Dan, during this period of time, you already have a city established by around 2700 BCE. It reached its zenith around 2500 BCE, and it was a pretty extensive population. In fact, according to Iran, it had a population between 7,500 to 10,000 people during the early Bronze Age. And I got to tell you, that's a lot of people. That's a lot of people for those days, right? We found there pottery figurines of animals. We're not sure if these pottery figurines, if they are, we're not sure if they're toys or they're used for cultic reasons. So, give you a heads up on this. In archaeology, especially in the area that I am delving into, um, sometimes when an archaeologist is unable to identify a particular artifact, sometimes in the write-up, they will say that this was used for ritual purposes, which is the way of saying we don't know what it's used for. So I don't know. But there could be these figurines of animals are connected to a form of worship, but they could just be toys. We find 22 seal impressions of a herringbone design, concentric circles that seem to have religious significance, and a human figure with the arms extended upward in prayer. What I find is fascinating, and you're going to see this a lot, is that with ancient Canaanite religion and ancient Israelite religion, a common form of when a person prays is they lift their arms up. And you're going to see this also in many of the images of the deities. They'll also have their arms up. But for we humans, mere mortals, the idea the arms are up is raised towards the sky, raised towards the heavens, so to speak. I want to say that, I want to add that a traditional Jewish praying oftentimes was with the arms raised. And this goes into later on early Christianity. If you take a look at the catacombs of Rome, you'll realize that many scenes of those who are worshiping also have their arms raised up in what's called the orantes, the praying position. So this is an ancient, this is before, you do the kneeling and praying kind of idea. You do have that. But this is the typical kind of worship. And so we do know from various images over the centuries that ancient Canaanites typically would pray with arms raised up. Now, there's other cities that were significant. You have a Hatzor during the early Bronze Age that was founded around 2700 BCE. It was a very small town during the early Bronze Age. It gets bigger during the Middle Bronze Age, but there is this unusually large structure that we're not sure what it's used for, and many people have interpreted it as used for religious purposes. Once again, we don't know. You also had ancient Gezer. Around 3000 BCE, it rises a little bit, and with caves cut out of the rocks. It was a small, unfortified settlement during the early Bronze Age. But Megiddo was different. Megiddo, as in the Valley of Armageddon, right? Megiddo was interesting because it's located near a spring, but it is in a perfectly strategic area along this narrow pass that connects the hinterland with the sea. In fact, this passageway leads to a route, I can say roughly a road that leads to Mesopotamia, okay, to the Fertile Crescent area. So people who are moving from the Fertile Crescent, Mesopotamia, across will use this passageway to reach the sea, because to the north and to the south, there are mountains. This is the pass. Now, when this route hits the sea, it goes in two different directions. It goes north towards Asia Minor, which is Turkey, and then on to Europe, and it goes south towards Egypt. This is known as the King's Highway. So it kind of forms, kind of a Y, right? And so this is so if one who controls this narrow passageway, they have the power. And so as a result, this is a location of many of the greatest battles in world history have occurred in this particular area. It came to be thought that if one controls this pass, one controls the Middle East, and this was believed for a very long time. I mean, you do have a big battle, of course, between the Egyptians and the Hittites near Kadesh, which is near Megiddo, in the same Jezreel Valley that occurred. During the time of Ramses II, which is during the 1200s. And yeah, I mean, it's pivotal back and forth. But you had other battles that occurred beyond that over the course of history, going into the time of the Persians, going to the time of Alexander the Great, moving in to the time of the Romans, going on to the time of when the Byzantine Empire, moving into battles there, big ones, pivotal ones, during the Arabs when they arrived in this area. Then, of course, battles during the Crusades, and then all the way up until World War I. And so doing archaeology in this area is just like a big pile of weapons. So you want to know everything about weapons being used over a period of time. You just do archaeology around around this area, around Megiddo, this particular area. Well, Megiddo is a city site, right? But later on, people were thinking, so many battles occurred here over the centuries. Why not the final battle to end all battles? The valley then becomes the location for Armageddon. So the Jezreel Valley, the Valley of Armageddon, it's one and the same. And yes, I have been there. Well, what's interesting about this is Megiddo, which from that word we get Armageddon. It was, of course, occupied as early as 5000 BCE, and you would think so because, it's so strategic by the Yarmoutian culture, which has many female figurines, quite a bit. It seems almost like a not a matriarchal culture, but at least egalitarian, followed by the Wadi Raba culture. But during the early Bronze Age, this area was fortified. There was a palace there, but we're here about religion, aren't we? There was a temple. I wish we knew what that temple was dedicated to, but it was one of the largest temples in the entire Near East at that time. It was 47.5 meters by 22. It's basically covered 1,100 square meters. That's pretty large for a temple at that time. In fact, on average, most temples at this time were about 100 meters. So think about that. 100 meters as compared to 1,100 meters. So, whoa, it's a great edifice and dates from the early Bronze Age. So you can understand that large city early on, strategic everybody wants it. And right there, the role of religion comes about. While we can't tell you who they worshiped, we know that animal sacrifice was heavily in evidence. In fact, they have found 2 long corridors along the main structure that are full of bones, lots of bones. Now, interestingly enough, they didn't remove the bones. They just kept accumulating in these 2 corridors. So the bones were stored here for some reason. Some people believe that after the sacrifice, the bones were still considered holy or sanctified, and so it was wrong to throw them out. However, they did sort of dispose of them in another way. And we have archaeologists have taken a look at this. And so we know that 80% of these bones are young sheep and goats. The last 20% are cattle. There are no human remains. But the western corridor is filled mostly with limb bones, just the limbs. Oh, but you just arms and legs. And we see on them these cut marks. And so perhaps they're being prepared. Perhaps the limb bones is what people are consuming in a sacred dining context. Why am I making such a big deal of this? Because the bones in the eastern corridor, there's evidence of them being burned, and they're not limbs. There's hardly any limbs at all. It's filled with, the majority are heads, skulls. So you got skulls. So you got limbs in one corridor and skulls in the other. And yet they're preserving them while they're burning, but there's the heads. So what is the significance? Once again, we don't know. But when you approach this great temple, there's a path of basalt rocks. It led to the entrance. There's an altar that was opposite of it. It had 12 columns along the long rectangular longitude axis. By the way, the around the columns, each of the stones made about a ton. I mean, so we're talking a massive structure. And so for me, that tells you that, well, whatever the religion, or I should say the god that was worshipped there in the early Bronze Age, it was pretty significant, very important. And it was one of the largest temples in the entire Near East at that time. I've seen it. So I'm smiling because it's pretty big. Okay, anyway, let's move on. So meanwhile, in the what's called the Besor Valley, called En Besor, which is the southern section of Canaan, we take a look, and the Egyptians are actually moving in. What most people don't realize is that the Egyptians, for a period of time, and they'll do it again, but during this period of time, during around 3,500 to 3,000 BCE, the Egyptians start to expand into the southern part of Canaan. We have found, for example, the Egyptian pharaoh Narmer. We have found a cartouche of bats and a fragment of a wine jar connected to Egyptians, and they basically had this area for about 200 years. They're going to get it again later on, and the reason why they're there is because of the copper and the bitumen from the around the Dead Sea area, as well as various minerals. So the Egyptians are there. Also, the highlands of Palestine had was really fertile at this time, and so the Egyptians used it for the harvesting of various fruits, nuts, and vegetables. I know you go to the Arabah region today and the Negev area, and it's like desert, but it wasn't then. At that time, it was fertile. It was nice. So now, when it comes to the first time we mention the first mention of Canaan, let's go there. When was Canaan first mentioned? The area. We find that in the Ebla tablets. The Ebla tablets. Now, Ebla, as I told you, I'm including under the Levant and under the Canaanites. I'm including Syria in this conversation. Ebla was a city that thrived in the 3rd to the 2nd millennium BCE. It's 34 miles southwest of Aleppo. And it thrived in the early Bronze Age. In fact, at that time, it had power over much of northern and eastern Syria, but it was destroyed for the first time around 2200 BCE. So what happens is that, well, we have an archive. See, these tablets were discovered from an archive that preserves 1,800 complete clay tablets, as well as 4,700 fragments. And so what happened, I think this is interesting, it was actually preserved as a result of the destruction of the archive. Now you're thinking, what? Today, of course, we use paper, and when people destroy things, the paper goes up in flames. But what happened in the Ebla situation is that the tablets were on clay, and they're on shelves. And during the fire, the wooden shelves collapsed, and the clay tablets fell into the fire. It actually baked them and preserved them to this day. So it acted like a kiln. So these are preserved. And within this archive, we find the first mention of the all-high Canaanite sky god, El, at this time. That's before the archive ranges between 2,500 to 2,200 BCE. And so, yeah, we have reference first time to El. The second, another god that is mentioned in this archive is Baal. And finally, Asherah. So already between 2,500 to 2,200 BCE, we have mentioned of El, Asherah, and Baal. Okay. But we also have reference to one who is known as the Lord of Canaan, the Lord of Canaan. And in the archive of Ebla, this is referring to a god by the name of Dagon. So Dagon is mentioned. In fact, he is known as the Lord of Canaan. He's understood as a god of grain at this time. Now, it's interesting because Canaan is a variation of another word that is Canaan. And Canaan, obviously, is the beginning of the word Canaan. Canaan. Got it? So it's Canaan, right? Canaan, and then Canaan, and we say Canaan. So it is mentioned there in this archive. Now it appears that Dagon, not El, was the most important deity in Ebla. But there you have it. Dagon was known as the Lord of Canaan, the Lord of the land, the Lord of the gods. Used quite a bit. Okay, so let's move on. This is interesting, right? We're moving on to the Middle Bronze Age Canaan. Middle Bronze Age Canaan. It's 2,100 to 1,550 BCE, so 2100 to 1550 BCE. This is the Middle Bronze Age. The Middle Bronze Age, you have an extensive amount of writing. So, I know that a lot of people, they think, we don't have much about any of this. We just have the Bible. I guess it's surprising news. We know a lot about it, and so much more than what is written in the Bible. We're talking about it all the time. We don't have conversations about it. They're not as popular when it comes to lectures. So I'm glad you're all here listening up. So after the archive of Ebla, the next reference to Canaan arrives by way of what's called the Mari letters, dating from around 2000 BCE. The city of Mari was an Assyrian outpost, early Assyrian outpost in Syria. There is a reference, one letter written by Mutibissir to Shamji Adad I, who reigned from 1809 to 1776 BCE. He was the king of Assyria. He writes, "It is in Rasum that the brigands, which is the word is Habatim, and the Canaanites are situated." So we have, now the actual word is not quite Canaanites. It is I'm going to spell it with Latin letters. It's Kinahum. So it's Canaan. So, but we're getting there, And so you see the gradual evolution, but Canaan is there. The question is, we're not sure if it refers to people who are indigenous or people who are invading. We're not sure about the context there. So during the Middle Bronze Age, hey, we're back to Eldan. Hey. We take a look at it, and there's again, there's a period of time of not much going on, and then suddenly things start to happen in Middle Bronze Age 2A, between 2000 to 1750. So a thriving settlement. It wasn't called Tel Dan at that time. It was known as Laish. So we have found 4 skeletons were found inside one of the tombs that had a basalt roof. We found ramparts. Now, when I talk about ramparts, because during this period of time, fortifications appear all over Canaan, thick fortifications. Many of these are connected to those known as the Hyksos, Hyksos, who would later on invade Egypt and will dominate during the Second Intermediate period. They'll be defeated by Ahmose I in the New Kingdom. But yeah, so you have one of these mighty structures, and I'm going to describe it. It's amazing. Again, I've seen it in person, and I'm really impressed. But the ramparts. So here, the ramparts are characterized by a stone core construction of rough stones meant to support the steep incline of earth. Thus, the stone core was 6.5 meters thick and reached 18 meters in height from base to top. The foot of the outer embankment is about 27 meters from the core. The earth was built up against this core, alternating layer by layer, with reddish brown soil and debris of earlier occupations. The layers were further sealed by a layer of travertine materials that served to protect rampart. What's interesting is this rampart was approximately 40 degrees, which is really steep. It's a very steep earthen defense system. And so, we're going to see others of this type all around. The ones, especially in the southern area, like in Jericho, are connected to the Hyksos, who are becoming more warlike Canaanites. Now, I do talk more about the Hyksos by themselves in another lecture that is posted, so you can listen to that. I don't want to spend too much time on the Hyksos because that's another conversation. They are connected to the Canaanites. There's also something else I saw myself, and then it collapsed. What they found was a triple arched gate. That's right. They first found it near the ramparts in 1978. 1979, they started excavating it. 1980, it was exposed. I got there. I first saw it in 1986. It's an arch, a real arch. I know you say the Etruscans and Romans, they had the arch. Well, guess what? This is a real arch. What is interesting about it? The entrance to this 3.1 meter high gate from outside the city was by way of a monumental stone steps rising from the plain below. There's a second as well as a third arch. But for some strange reason, and we do know why now, is that it was used for only a few decades, although foot traffic underneath shows some wear, so maybe a little bit longer. And then suddenly they decided to bury the whole thing and packed it with mud and everything else and sealed it. And we're going, why do they seal this? Well, later on, as the archaeologists were digging, they realized that the gate, the arch, was in danger of collapsing, and they didn't want to collapse on anybody. And so what they did is they buried it to preserve it. Of course, many will say or claim that this, because it was in existence during the time of supposedly of Abraham, in between 1800 and 1750 BCE that Abraham, if he did enter, and he would have gone under this gate. Now, what's going to happen is that we take a look. As I mentioned before, the Hyksos, they are starting to dominate this area, not more the southern Canaanite areas, but they are. We do know they are from Canaan. In fact, according to the Pharaoh, Camus, who reigned from 150 to 150s BCE, he refers to Epepi as a chieftain of Rejenu, and that's, of course, the Egyptian name for Canaan. So there you have it. And they'll eventually invade. And between 1650 to 1550 BCE, the Hyksos, who were, and they still were in Canaan, will invade Egypt and expand their areas. And as a result, the Middle Kingdom of Egypt will fall. So Canaan was pretty strong. It was pretty powerful. Okay. When we take a look also, I have to bring this up. We have also found a large amount of jar burials of infants. And these are located beneath the floors and courtyards of houses. In fact, Biran, who excavated this, said virtually every excavated room of a Middle Bronze domestic unit contains a jar burial with the remains of a single infant, and in one case, two, no more than 2 years of age. Biran simply closes down the discussion by saying that these, quote, infants apparently died of a natural death, since there's no evidence to suggest that the inhabitants of Laish engaged in child sacrifice, unquote. But the thing is, a lot of scholars have looked at this and go, yeah, but there's no evidence to say that they were not used for child sacrifice. There is evidence elsewhere that this is beginning in the area of Canaan during this period of time. So we talked about child sacrifice could be starting during this time. Okay, now you have the city of Hatzor, which was really small before. I mean, it was really small during early Bronze Age. During the Middle Bronze Age, however, it reached its greatest population density by 1750 BCE. It covered 30 acres, and it had around quite a bit, 20,000 people. So I know we think about, we read the Bible or we listen to these various stories. We think that, they're sitting around in the countryside and there's just a bunch of sheep everywhere. But the reality is that ancient Canaan is very, at times, cosmopolitan. Lots of urban centers all over the place, city after city, that we keep excavating. So that's something that we need to keep in mind. Okay, so there you have that. Also, of course, we have Gezer. At Gezer was another important Canaanite city. And during this period of time, it also became pretty large with massive stone walls and towers and protected by a 5-meter high earthen rampart covered with plaster, much like at Tel Dan. There was also what's a wooden city gate. And we find something interesting. We find 10 monolithic stone steles oriented north to south. And let's investigate this. Many will say that this is evidence for what is called a Bama. Bamah. Bama, what this is a high place. A high place is an open air altar. It's a shrine that's located at an elevated height. So here you have it, the example of one. So there are 10 monumental standing stones, many of them 10 feet tall, most of them oriented north to south, next to a massive rectangular limestone basin. Now they have found, seems to be a connection to some circular structures west of the site. They've also found jar burials. Now, this is a point of contention. In these jar burials, they are below a plastered surface that surrounds these stones. Several infants were found less than a week old when they died. Some of these bodies show sign of being burnt. The way and the style does look like the same kind of methodology that would be used later on amongst the Carthaginians, for the prophets, who we do know really did do human sacrifice. And so many will say that this is a human sacrifice, that the human sacrifice in connection to the consecration of this high ground. Now, now we do know for a fact that they did human sacrifice at high places in literature and other areas. This could be an early example of it. However, William Deaver disagrees. He says it's connected to a covenant renewal ceremony, and that he said that these infant skeletons were there way before the site was established on top. It still doesn't preclude the possibility that these are still sacrifices, but he just kind of goes on right there. Albright says it was a mortuary shrine. Grassier says these stones were set up to mark a treaty or a covenant between 10 different groups. So 10 different groups, 10 different stones. And people argue back and forth, right? So you see this quite often. But this could be an indication of this. Megiddo, meanwhile, remember Megiddo had a huge temple in the early Bronze Age. During the Middle Bronze Age, there is another bomb that is there, right? It was another high place. Sorry, another high place. It's the first one for Megiddo. This high place is 24 by 30 feet. It's an oval platform. I have been to it. I've walked up. It's about 6 feet tall. So so it's not as tall as I am, but because I'm 6'4.5", but pretty tall. There's stairs that lead to the top. There's a wall surrounding the structure. So there's another high place where the Canaanites worship the gods. There's yet another one at Neria in Western Galilee, another circular open air platform, and a rectangular building nearby. So high places are popping up all over now during the Middle Bronze Age. Okay, so we have, of course, the state of Ugarit now becomes important during the Middle Bronze Age. This is the coastal kingdom that traded with Egypt and Cyprus and the Aegean, Syria, and the Hittites, and once again we take a look. It was divided into quarters. With the northeast quarter has a walled enclosure where there's an acropolis having three important buildings: a temple dedicated to Baal Hadad, a temple dedicated to Dagon, and a library where many texts were also found, Ugarit texts. So now we go south into Jericho, and we see that there's yet another fortification there that was connected to the Hyksos. However, it was destroyed around 1550 BCE when the Hyksos were defeated by the Egyptians. Now, this is going to be hard to wrap around, but what will happen is this. Here we go. So during the Middle Bronze Age, the Hyksos, who are from Canaan, they invade, at the very end, they invade, and they, they basically, during the intermediate period, invade Egypt. They take Egypt for about 100 years. Then what happens is in the late Bronze Age, the Hyksos are defeated by Othmos I of the New Kingdom. And as they're defeated, the Egyptians chase the Hyksos back to Canaan. This is important for you to know. They don't stop. They continue to chase these Canaanite Hyksos into Canaan, and then start to conquer Canaan themselves. For much of the late Bronze Age, Canaan was under Egyptian control up until the 1200s, up until the time of Ramses II. It was under the Egyptians either directly or through client kingdoms. Because, hey, and Egypt captured Megiddo, right? Remember that pivotal area I talked about? They were able to capture it. Although it kind of went back and forth between the Egyptians and the Hittites, they're always fighting in this area, many battles. So we take a look, and yes, we have lots of sources for the Canaanites during this period of time too. The Elachus statute of King Adrimi, dating from 1500 BCE, which is, he mentions the land of Canaan. The Elaka tablets do give more information, and there's a few other, actually quite a few other sources as well. Now, we have, of course, the story of Thutmose III, 1479 to 1425 BCE. He made 17 campaigns into Palestine and the Near East, expanding the Egyptian kingdom all the way to the Euphrates River. He thought what happened is that the campaign was felt necessary to Thutmose II when the Prince of Megiddo and Kadesh formed an alliance, both of their cities, of course, located in the Jezreel Valley. This guarded the way to the sea and split off so much of the rest of the Fertile Crescent. So they kind of had this juggernaut. They had this opening. And so what happened is Thutmose decided to attack Megiddo first, leading his army into the narrow opening between the mountains. He says, horse behind horse, man behind man. His Majesty showed the way by his own footsteps, and Thutmose was able to capture Megiddo. He created buffer states in Palestine as well as in Syria. And now, later on, of course, you're going to have, you're going to have various records, right? And we have the Amarna records as well. So as a source for this period of time. Now, Thutmose III, he was able to actually capture also Gezer as well. But later on, Gezer revives and swears allegiance to the Egyptian pharaohs during the 1350s and the 1330s BCE. But what you don't know is that Bet Shun, which is the southern part of Galilee, yes, it was conquered by Thutmose III, but it becomes a center of Egyptian power. Yes, there happens to be a Canaanite temple that's built on the summit that measures 39 meters in length, but it has a stele of Egyptian hieroglyphics, which state that the temple was dedicated to the god Mekhl. But what happens is that we discover during this time a lot in the way of Egyptian remains, evidence of pottery, statuary, and gods and goddesses. So Canaan is now being influenced heavily by Egyptian culture. In fact, we take a look, and it looks like the majority of the people who are living at Bethshem, south of the Sea of Galilee, during the 18th through the 20th dynasties were Egyptians, administrators and soldiers. So, wow. Yeah. Meanwhile, Tel Dan is thriving, the center of metallurgy and making various and pottery ware, and we also find a Mycenaean tomb from that time. We at Tel Burna, we find another chamber dedicated to Canaanite god. We also discover remnants of face masks that we don't know what they represent. Meanwhile, what's going to happen is Ugarit will continue to thrive and be strong all the way to the time when the Sea People arrive. So when the Sea People arrive, what happens is that destroys the Egyptian power. So during the 1200s, Egyptians are defeated by the Sea Peoples, and so the Egyptians lose Canaan. Also, the Hittites are kind of wiped off the map, and a group of Sea People settle along the coast of Canaan, and they're known as the Philistines. You heard of the Philistines? Those are sea people who decided to settle down what is now the Gaza Strip. Okay, so Ugarit, though, falls during this period of time, but Ugarit's a great source of understanding the late Bronze Age period of time. And you wanted to have details of Canaanite religion. Well, just go ahead and go there a little bit. So the religion of Ugarit is very way similar to the Canaanite system, as I mentioned before. Even though the language is different, they are still in culture so much in the way being Canaanites. Their chief god was El, who was the father of 70 gods and goddesses of the pantheon. El's wife, the mother of the pantheon's god and goddesses, was understood as Athirat or Elat, although her name also connects in many ways to the name Asherah, okay, Asherah, as mentioned in the Hebrew Bible. Of El's sons and daughters, Baal was most popular. He was the storm god who brought rain and fertility, sometimes in conflict with Mot, who is the god of death. He's a god of life. Mot is a god of death. It's interesting because according to the sources of this time, he was of mild character and good-humored. So let's not give him all the bad press that we always hear, right? Well, he never refused what was asked of him. Of course, then again, at other times, he might kill his father or son or cut off the head of his own daughter. So I don't know, kind of varies. Just make sure you get him, get old Baal, in a good mood. Okay. Although Baal's offsprings were El and Asherah, in some cases it's reversed, by the way. Ugarit texts indicate that eventually Baal drove El from a leading place and took over his position. Excuse me. So I meant to say the Baal was the offspring of El and Asherah. So what happens is that we take a look. Now, accordingly, there are those also known as the Asherim, who are the plural of Asherah, and they're connected to the Baal cult and obviously Asherah. Some people say that they are connected also as being male as well as female prostitutes. So, and that through this ritual prostitution, they're able to make the crops grow, but there is still disagreement about that, right? So, lots of disagreement. So we're talking about, archaeologists always fight amongst themselves. And we have found so many texts here. I want to read one. There's actually one story where El becomes drunk at a feast. These gods get drunk a lot, and he had to be carried home by his sons. And so how do you revive, after you have a long day of drinking, you happen to be God El and you're drunk and you have a hangover? What are you going to do? Well, there's a special recipe to get over your headache after drinking. And so what it is you put, I'm not joking. Okay, you're going to laugh when I say this. You are going to laugh. You put, I'm not kidding, the hair of a dog on your forehead. And a particular plant it's called pook. That's put with it. And and then what happens is you have put it together, then you have a drink that mixes this with fresh olive oil. And there it is. Yes, I know. It's like it's not meant to be connected to this idea, but it is literally the hair of the dog. It's not the origin of hair of the dog, which I think is pretty funny. It's just a weird coincidence that. Anyway, I couldn't resist. Anyway, this is actually from Pardee, a professor of Northwest Semitic philology. So if you don't believe me, this is academic. It's not. I gave you my source. Once again, thank you, Parday, a professor of Northwest Semitic philology, for that contribution to the beginning of Hair the Dog. Well, we have many texts, as I mentioned, and they include prescriptions for sacrifice, although they're really dry to read. And I do have them here. I'm not going to read them. I'll just read a ewe is to be a, we can't translate this word sacrifice. A dove also is to be the something sacrifice. You also as a sacrifice 2 kidneys and a liver of a bull and a ram to help. It's like it's all kind of broken, it's fragments. But what we can put together, what we can gather together is clear, right? It is clear that the Ugrat cultic system was centered around bloody sacrifice. That is, the slaughter of animals in honor of a deity. Oh yeah, thank you for the hair of the dog comment. Yeah, I know. Anyway, this was a regular sacrificial system, and we take a look and we realize the sacrifices happen usually during 2 important times each month, during the new moon and during the full moon. These are the most important sacrifices during those times. There is some sacrificial activity at the 2nd and 3rd quarters, or the beginning of the lunar week, so to speak. We know that. We know that in looking at the sacrifices, that those Ugarat, and we see this also evidence amongst the Canaanites, they had a really interesting relationship of how humans and the gods interrelate, and the sacrifices seem to reflect an idea that these gods and goddesses need to be fed, that the blood and the meat feeds them, it vivifies them, it gives them strength, it makes them strong. So there is this feeding idea that we see also in other ancient religions, like, for example, Brahmanism. Before it becomes Hinduism, we have the same idea, this feeding of deities. We see this in other traditions as well, and I think that's interesting. Also, they think it's they need to take care of these deities. They need to take care of them, dress them up, and and also to communicate with them. So there you have it. They did have cultic meals, in which is interesting, is they offer up a meal which you eat, but that same meal is offered up to the deity too. And so you and the god or the goddess are sharing a meal together. And so this is understood as sharing in the power or the energy of the god or the goddess. I think this is it. It's almost like this early form of a communion or Eucharist, right? Are you seeing it? So there you have it. So you don't just give I know in other belief systems, of course, you make offerings, but it's interesting because in this case, you're feeding the god at the same time as you're feeding yourself, right? Not later on or earlier on. So anyway, there's another bit I'll mention here. It's from RS 1002. That's my source. This tablet, it's found 1929. It talks about that we as humans have something that is, the best translation is, we do error or sin, that we deal with anger amongst each other, and we deal with impatience, right? Well, that's no epiphany, right? So we do mistakes towards one another, we get angry with one another, and we become impatient. But they have a right in which to take care of that, to bring concord, to bring people together. How this works is they have basically they have 6 sections that are divided into 3 for the men of Ugarat and 3 for the women. So the idea is you have various acts or rites. So you have 6 rites, 6 cultic actions. 3 of them are given to the men, and 3 of them are given to the women. You guys got it so far? Yeah, I think already I'm interested. It's like, wow, it divides men and women as equal. And they have to be those who are from within the walls, it says, of Ugarit. Then what happens is that within each of those rites, they refer to certain situations where people show sin or anger or impatience. And what they do is they resolve that. So they talk, so each of the 6 sections have different issues that need to be resolved. Sometimes ethnic issues, sometimes geographical problems, sometimes social issues. So they mentioned that. At the end of each of the 6, there is the appropriate sacrifice to appease for peace in that area. But only one single animal prescribed. And so it's a different one that happens to fit. One that happens to be a donkey. So after you do this ritual, you're supposed to have concord and peace in the city. And it's kind of cool. I don't know. What do you think? It's very complicated, but yeah, you heard it here, right? So there you have it. So we're gaining lots of information here. Obviously, when it comes to looking into the future, the means is through the liver. Yeah, they look at the liver, they divine the future through the liver. They're, of course, specialists. What they will do is actually mark the model to tell us the result of the consultation, whether it's a yes answer or a no answer, along with who's prescribing this. It reminds me a lot of the bone oracles that we see in China. So there you have it. Okay, so there's a few other things. One more. You do have incantations that connect, that are found, that are connecting to protection. And I will read one, and then I will move on. Okay, so first of all, here's one incantation. It's RS 92, 2014, and it goes as follows. It reads, when the unknown one calls you and begins foaming, I, for my part, will call you. I will shake bits of sacred wood so that the serpent not come up against you, so that the scorpion not stand up under you. The serpent will indeed not come against you. Scorpion will indeed not stand up under you. In like manner, may the tormentors, the sorcerers, not give ear to the word of evil man, to the word of any man, when it sounds forth in their mouth, on their lips. May the sorcerers, the tormentors, and pour it into the earth for Utretia, for his body, and for his members. That's the guy's name. So obviously, this is used for protection, right? It's an interesting, right? It's an interesting one. So we'll just go into that. But so then all of a sudden, we move into our current, the Iron Age, and I'll just say a few things that the sea people arrive. Yeah. And as a result of that, the Egyptian power, as I said, is broken. The Hittite power is broken. The Egyptians no longer have control of Canaan as a result of that. And many scholars will say the Israelites at this point leave Egypt or join others of their group and enter Canaan in around 1200 BCE. Now, I do have to say this, is that there's evidence, and we have inscriptional evidence and everything else that show that there are Habaru, that there are those who are the Israelites have been there the whole time, but there is evidence that there are also Israelites or Habaru within Egypt. It's a little bit more of a mixed bag, but I don't want to go into it. But still, we're not about that. That's a whole other talk. We're about the Canaanites. But now Israel, which is mentioned by name, the Meretef Stele, does exist. because it's actually mentioned, the Egyptians do mention, right, during the 12 to the 1100s. But when we get to the time of Saul, David, and Solomon, or you don't believe that, that's fine. The idea of the monarchy, 11th, 10th centuries. Then you have the divided kingdom of Israel around, so that happens around 922 BCE. And then, of course, Israel, the northern kingdom, falls in 721 or 722 under the Assyrians. And the southern kingdom of Judah falls in 587 BC under the Babylonians. Okay, so there you have it. So I'm just trying to tell you that now you have more of a mixed bag of Canaan, but you still have the old Canaanites. Well, we take a look here, and when it comes to a focused, how do I say this? Focused cosmology, or even a cosmogony, we don't have much that is organized enough. So we do have somebody by the name of Philo-Biblos, who lived from 64 to 141 CE, and he's very much influenced by Greek and Roman thought. He does attempt to write some kind of pantheon and cosmology and cosmogony, but you know, I mean, he is talking about people that he's related to, so I guess it's true. The question is, how far back does it go? But he talks about those known as the Elohim, or the children of El. And he said that he obtained this information about this cosmology from a certain San Chumathron of Berytus or Beirut. And he said that first there was a creator by the name of Elion, or El Eon, like El Eon, right? El Eon. That sounds like El. Aeon. Anyway, Elion, who was the father of the divinities, and he was married to Baruth, from which we get the name of the city Beirut, right? The marriage results in, of course, offspring, one being the heavens and the other being the earth. And of course, he uses Greek names Uranus or Uranus, right? Or Gaia for this. But the reason why I'm reading this is there's one really interesting factor, is that there's mention of the twin mountains. The twin mountains known as Tar Gezizi and Thar Magai. And what happens is that these two mountains hold up the Earth-circling ocean, and thereby the earth. So basically you have this 3-story universe, you know, and you have these two giant mountains, and you have this encircling sea, and these mountains support this encircling sea, which is kind of abstract, but they're understood in some cases as pillars, right? And I'm thinking to myself, wouldn't they be supporting the concentric dome of the sky, right? You know, with the stars. But you have this added idea that you have also an encircling sea that sometimes is understood as beyond it, and sometimes is beneath the earth. But anyway, I think he got his notes wrong, but hey, that's just me. But there you have it. Then you have, during this, there's one more factor that we have to bring in, and that is the worship at Mesoboth sites. Mesoboth sites. Now, what's a Mesoboth? This is an altar for a sacrifice that's oftentimes a standing stone. That's what it's a Mesoboth. So, for example, a place known as Beth El, which means house of God. You have the story according to Genesis. Jacob had a vision of God, and following this experience, took the stone pillow, set it upright as a stone, and dedicated to this moment, to this epiphany, stating, "This stone that I have set up as a pillar, Mazaboth," the word is used, Mazaboth, in the Hebrew, "shall be God's house." There's a Mazaboth standing outside of Shechem, connected to Joshua. In fact, we have documented as many as 142 separate Mazzaboth sites. In the Negev and the eastern Sinai, and the word Mazzaboth appears 34 times in the Bible itself. Now, the earliest Mazzaboth goes way back when, standing stone, to the 11th and 10th millennium BCE, but it became very popular by the 6th to the 3rd millennium BCE. According to the tale of Akwat from the 15th century BCE, this is a cuneiform tablet from Ugarit, Dan El, Dan El, father Akwat, complained to the gods that he, quote, does not have a son to set up a Mazzaboth in a temple in his name, which seems to connect to the idea that maybe it could be used for dedication for ancestral spirits. But we do also know that they represented gods, right? Or the idea of the gods that you could not make any image of. And so there you have it. We have found at Tel Asapide, we have found donkeys as well as sheep and goats that were buried along with these standing stones from the early Bronze Age. So there you have it. And once again, we do find evidence, like we saw at Gezer, of burials connected to skeletons of children. So not only Gezer has them, but a place called Tanakh, and yes, Megiddo has them too by the standing stone. So it's not just that, but we also have, there's a really, I'm not going to go into this, but the Phoenicians who interrelate with the Canaanites and who do connect to the standing stone culture, but also they connect to the infant burial, right? The infant burial connection. It turns out that, remember, it is from the area of the Phoenicians. You have them moving to a place known as Carthage and setting up, right, a place at Carthage. So the culture of Carthage in North Africa is directly connected to the culture of the Canaanites as well as the Phoenicians. And we know for a fact, beyond a reasonable doubt, within the last decade, proven over and above that they did do child sacrifice. We knew this before. We now have found the material remains of that, and quite a bit, pretty extensive, in places known as poppet fields. So, and the urns are very similar to the ones we're seeing here. So there seems to be a connection there, but we have other places as well. The Hebrew Bible, of course, attests that burnt offerings of children was current in early Palestinian religion. We find this in Leviticus, Deuteronomy, Second Kings, Jeremiah, Ezekiel. In Jeremiah, it says, they burned their sons and daughters. That was no command of mine. Deuteronomy in Second Kings talks about that they're the ones who make a son or daughter pass through the fire or to burn up in fire. By the way, the Bible doesn't mention any gender emphasized, no age, just that they're children. Having said that, I play everything. Hello, does anybody remember the sacrifice that was supposed to happen? When Abraham was asked to, oh yeah, that's right, go up to take his first, his second-born child. He's supposed to take Isaac, right, up onto Mount Moriah to sacrifice him. Last I checked, that was his kid, and he was being sacrificed, right? But at the last minute, obviously, you got an animal in the nettles that takes the place of his sacrifice. So, even leaks of that go into Jewish traditions. So, just want to mention that it's important. You also, of course, have connections in Jewish literature to Moloch, which we'll go into later on. But there you have it. And of course, let's move on to specific gods. I know we're not running out of time quite yet. Obviously, we got started late. So let's go over some of the major gods now in detail. We have a really good view. I'm very happy. A good overview of Canaanite religion and kind of all its different aspects. But let's get more specific. Let's talk about El first. Then we'll get to, yes, Baal. Absolutely. One of the central gods is El. His name first appears on a list of gods discovered at the Royal Archive of Ebla. Now, he is described as being the ancient of gods. He's described as being the father of all gods. A bull is oftentimes representing him. In fact, they call him the bull god. Other names for him are creator of creatures, father of the gods, father of man, creator eternal, God eternal, which is also mentioned in Genesis 21:33. He's also known as El, the warrior, father of years. And I like this one. This is interesting. It's Lupon, which means he is the one who has the shrouded face that you don't fully see. In fact, this idea of him as a bull will start to kind of fade away, and El is understood as one that you can't make any depiction of, you can't represent, except for a Mazaboth or a standing stone. You can represent it that way. And so you're going to start having standing stones or Mazaboths representing the god El, who is the great father god who's connected to the sky. What I think is interesting about this is most scholars do agree that Mount Moriah was a site of a Mazaboth site, and that, of course, today is the Temple Mount, where the Dome of the Rock is, and that's where the Wailing Wall, and that's, of course, where the Jewish temple was located, both the first and the second, and the Holy of Holies. Well, that was dedicated to El, and but it was also a Mazaboth site. Another one is because you have El, because El is a name not only for the high Canaanite god, it is a name for the Jewish god, known as El. You got to remember that. Oh, I want to read this real quick. There is here's a hymn. It says, "The Eternal One has made a covenant with us. Asherah has made a pact with us, and all the sons of El, and the great council of all the holy ones, with oaths of heaven and ancient earth." I thought that was beautiful. So El has a is a very important. Now there is a text. Let's go here. El. It's probably the only one you'll remember. let's tell an El story. It's the story of Shakar and Shalom. The story goes, once upon a time, El, he came upon the shore of the sea, and he saw two women who is described as who bobbed up and down. And as a result of that, of seeing them bobbing up and down, he became aroused. And so he invited the two women to come with him. So what does he do for his date with these two women? Well, the first thing he does is he kills a bird by throwing a staff at it. So, for you guys, if you want to impress somebody, just take your staff. You're going to go on a date, throw your staff at a bird to impress your date. No. Then the birds were roasted over. The bird was roasted over a fire. Then he asked the women to tell him when the bird was fully cooked, and then to either address him as either a husband or a father, for after that point he will be called one or the other. Well, so they're seeing this bird being cooked and being roasted, and they tell him when it's done. He knew, but they told him, and they called him husband. He then, according to the story, lay with them, and as a result, they gave birth, each one to Shakar, which is the dawn, and the other Shalim, which is the dusk. So morning and evening. Again, El was with his now wives, and he gave birth to the more gracious gods. The cleavers of the sea, they are called. Children of the sea is another word. The names of these wives are not mentioned specifically, but there's an early reference to Athirat, who is El's chief wife, as well in other sources, the goddess Ramu, which means the one of the womb, but it could be a number of them. So the names just kind of are more flexible. Okay, now accordingly, Baal, according to the Baal cycle, El, it goes to his dwelling is a place called Mount Lel. The word Lel means night, so he's on the Mount Night, located at the place where the fountains of the two rivers at the spring move out through the depths. So there you have it. So now El, according to the Bible, when Abraham first arrived in Canaan, he meets Melchizedek. Melchizedek is the priest king of Salem and accepts blessings from the god called El. So the book of Genesis does directly connect the Canaanite god El as being also the same in name as the Jewish god El. Now Salem is Jerusalem, and it is located directly at Mount Moriah. Mount Moriah, where I said, used to be not only just an El site, but a Mazabah site where there's a standing stone, because this is El. Now I just mentioned there's something else. There's another standing stone site a little further on, because you have El, Elal, Allah, and one of the standing stone sites would be Mecca. You're waking up. Wait, there's a connection. Yeah. This god was also known as El Yon, which means God of the Most High, which becomes a common epithet for God throughout the Hebrew Bible. So there, according to Exodus 6:2-3, the first name for the God of the Hebrews was El Shaddai, where he states, I reveal myself to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob as El Shaddai. But what does the word Shaddai mean? And of course, he also says, and that them I also by my name Yahweh. Well, the word Shaddai, there are three possibilities. Shaddai, El Shaddai. Shaddai could come from the root Shaddad, which means to overpower. So it means God to overpower, because El simply means God. It could also mean Shada, which means God of the breasts. So it's God that's connected to fertility. Furthermore, it could be related to the root Shadu, which means mountain, or mountain dweller. And so it means God of the mountain. Now, that makes a lot of sense. So El Shaddai is God of the mountain, or mountain dweller. And you know that El is connected to this great night mountain, is he not? So, and later on, you have this connection with, of course, various mountains, Sinai, for example. Now, the plural form of El, and related to the word Eloha, is Elohim. Elohim is used for multiple gods, such as Exodus 23, where it states, you shall have no other gods before me. That word is Elohim. But it is also used for just the Jewish God alone, as in Exodus 3:4, Elohim called unto him out of the midst of the bush. The word Elohim is used 2,500 times in the Bible. So I think there is directly a connection between Elohim, and, of course, the Jewish God. In fact, let's go a little bit further. I'll close up and we'll move on to Baal. El, the word El, the Canaanite god El, which is now obviously the Jewish God, is in many Jewish names. For example, Daniel El, which means God is my judge. Samuel El, which means God has heard. Ezekiel El, which means may God strengthen him. And Michael El means who is like God. In fact, there is also Israel, which means who prevails with God. So yes. So you're going, Canaanite religion and the Hebrew or Jewish religion are all connected? Yes, let's talk about Baal. I'll say Baal, because that's how you're supposed to say it. I didn't bail out on you, right? I keep order here. Maybe I should be the bailiff. Did I say that out loud? I did. Okay, bailiff. All right. So keeping order of this court, right? Okay, so the center of Baal Hadad's worship. First of all, the word Baal can mean Lord, it can mean master, it can mean owner, but male form. It can mean keeper, it can mean husband. It can be used as any honorific title, but oftentimes is connected with as Baal Hadad, and this is the sky and storm god who's connected to fertility and often referred to as El's son. Yeah, the center of Baal Hadad's worship amongst the Semites of the Northwest is in roughly northern Israel, Lebanon, and Western Syria. It's centered around various holy mountains, which we'll talk about in a little bit, right? So, by the way, one more thing. Baal worship is very common amongst the Israelites. It is. And we know this from the book of Joshua, Judges, but I want to say something else. It's interesting because a lot of Jewish names have the word Baal in it, like Ishbaal, Jerubbaal, Marubbaal. They all have it. And of course, you have, so I just want to mention that a little bit. And of course, you have the story of Jezebel and Ahab when you have the northern kingdom of Israel, and you have, of course, the institution of Baal or Baal worship there. Now, as I said, Baal is very much a storm of fertility god. And I do have a few things on him right here. Actually, very long inscriptions. But I don't want to go too much into this because I want to make sure we move at a good rate. In fact, but I want to read this so bad. Okay, well, I'll just read part of it. So we do have some inscriptions on this. So he, according to Baal's message to Anat, here he announces to Anat, the goddess, the word that he understands will be revealed to humanity who does not know it yet. So you have this. So now what happens, I'm going to just kind of paraphrase the document. In this narrative, this word is the message of cosmic fertility. And this will happen when a palace is built dedicated to Baal upon a certain Mount Sopon. When this palace is completed, then, of course, Baal will take his place, and he will do his cosmic work to make sure that we have fertility, right? We have the blessings. Now, there is a description here. Again, I'm paraphrasing here. That Anat describes the cosmic connection between the heavens and the deeps in connection to this cosmic fertility. So you have this. Now what happens is he states, "For I have a word I will tell you, a message I will recount to you, a word of tree and whisper of stone, a verse of heaven and earth, of deeps to the stars. I understand the lightning heaven does not know, the words humans do not know, the earth's masses do not understand. Come, and I will reveal it in the midst of my mountain, divine Sapin, in the holy place of the mount of my possession, in the pleasant place of the hill of victory." So beautiful, right? I mean, just beautiful. So, okay, so we have found a stele that depicts Baal as the king of the gods. It was discovered at Ugarit. And Baal is seen unleashing a storm. He's holding a club in his right hand and a spear in his left. And it looks like a lightning bolt, which extends upward in the form of a tree. And so it looks like it's becoming a tree. So he has this power of fertility. The metaphor is that the sprouting plant alludes to his effects upon the rain. We will get, of course, fertility as a result. He is shown wearing a beard. He has a horn headdress. He's clothed in lion skins. The stele dates sometime between the 18th and 15th century BCE. And so there you have it. So it's a Mount Sopon, therefore is a center part of his worship. Baal Hadad. Now, it is currently Mount Akra, and it's located directly along the Turkish and Syrian border, right there. This is the place where the great storm god made his home upon the peak. It was here that he was said to have built his mighty palace, all constructed of silver and blue lattice. Myths tell how from its peak, Baal Hadad often shot his lightning bolts down upon Yamm, the god of the sea, and Mot, the god of the underworld and death. Now, the goddess Anat was also worshipped here, but even before the Canaanite occupation, we know that Mount Akra was sacred to the Hurrians. Now, the Israelites call Mount Akra Zephon. And according to Isaiah 14:13, this is where the Canaanite gods were believed to assemble. Because of its location at the very northern edge of Israel, it is sometimes called Mount North because that's the very northern section. There you have it. So very important. Now, this mountain later on continues to be venerated. In fact, we see that the Greeks worship Zeus of Mount Casios. Casios is another name for Mount North, for Mount Zaphon. So you have the Greek king Seleucus I climbed this peak seeking advice from Zeus to where he should locate the future city of Seleucia. The Roman Emperor Trajan was spared from death after an earthquake in the city of Antioch in 114. So he went up on top of this mountain to give thanks to Zeus. In fact, he even minted coins showing this event. And of course, you have Hadrian, said to go up here, the Emperor Hadrian. And the story is that when he offered his sacrifices, lightning came down and consumed his sacrifice. So, something happened. Even the last pagan Roman emperor, Julian, 363, had ecstatic visions of Zeus Cassius upon this mountain. So it is, but here's the problem. It's on the border between Turkey and Syria. So it turns out this is an archaeological treasure. Absolutely. In fact, so much worship happened at the top of this mountain. The depth of ash and other debris goes as high as, hold your breath, 26 feet. 26 feet of debris from all the worshiping at that site. And also being about 180 feet wide at the very top. However, only the first 6 feet have been excavated up down to the Hellenistic level. The rest has not been excavated. Why? Because it's off limits. Why? Because it's a border between Turkey and Syria. So hopefully when there's peace someday, we can learn more about this great mountain. Another mountain that's important to Baal is Mount Hermon. Yeah, another one. And so upon its summit, also it is said that Baal had his palace. There's about 30 documented temples that dot Mount Hermon, along with other altars and holy sites. So this is another important place. In fact, I'm going to say something that, for me, it's exciting. So they have found at the very top what's called Kasar Antar. This is the highest known temple in the ancient world. It's a rectangular building sitting on an oval, and then there is of course, this building has no roof. There's an inscription on it, on the limestone stele, that reads as follows. It says, according to the command of the greatest and holy God, those who take an oath proceed from here. And so many archaeologists and scholars say that Mount Hermon is the place where you make oaths that are, given to Baal, right, for various things. Well, it's interesting. Here we go. Because accordingly, the book of Enoch, which dates from the 6th century BCE, there are angels under Semjaza who take an oath connected with the curse to take wives from humanity, the daughters of men. This oath, according to the book of Enoch, identifies Mount Hermon specifically as the place where the oath occurred. So, wow. So you have a connection to it with the book of Enoch. Isn't that great? Other gods are worshipped here as well, like Pan by the Greeks and the Romans too. So there, and then finally, of course, the third, I think, got three mountains. That's pretty great. Mount Carmel is also another location of the worship of Baal, another high place. In the 15th century BCE, Tutmosis III lists Carmel as a holy site for sacrifice. So the Egyptian that takes over this area lists it as a place of sacrifice. There was an altar here that was, of course, connects to another story. You guys remember this? According to 1 Kings 18, Yahweh and Baal were to prove themselves by lighting the sacrificial fire before them on this particular mountain, right? On Mount Carmel. So what happens is Elijah, so it's kind of a contest between the prophets of Baal and Elijah. And so they have two altars. And the idea is that whoever's the strongest is the contest is going to light the altar. So the Baal worshippers, Baal prophetesses, they go on for a long period of time praying and nothing happens, according to the story. Meanwhile, what happens here is Elijah even drenches his altar with water. And then in the end, when they supposedly give up, then he calls to God and the altar is lit from above. So this is the place where that supposed contest occurred. So there you have it. This place, by the way, was also sacred to the Pythagoreans as early as the 6th century BCE. Iamblichus, the Neoplatonist, also visited Carmel. Okay, let's do one more, because otherwise it'd be remiss, although I do have a few others, but I want to make sure. I think we did Baal pretty good. So let's make sure we do Asherah. Okay, Asherah, according to the Bible, a wooden pole symbolized a sacred tree representing the god Asherah. Canaanite religion venerated trees as goddesses with female figurines, sometimes even having a tree or branches of a tree etched between their navel and pubic triangle. We find this as early as the late Bronze Age, right, at various places. Outside the biblical texts, her name readily appears in much earlier Akkadian texts as the goddess Asheratum or Asheratu, as the wife of the god Anu, and the Hittite texts as Asherdu. Based upon the iconography, two animals often flank Asherah or a tree representing her. And if she is in human form, anthropomorphized, she is feeding each of them with bundles of grain. According to Canaanite beliefs, Asherah is the wife of El, as especially evident in the Ugarit texts. According to these sources, she is the lady Athirat of the sea. She is also she who treads upon the ocean. She is sometimes understood as Quanyatem Elam, which means the creatrix of the gods, or Elohim. Wait, Elohim again? But I thought that was used for connected to Elohim. Do you know that Elohim is a feminine plural? Okay, Loa is the masculine plural. Okay, I'll just move on pretty quickly, running quickly. So according to 2 Kings, King Manasseh of Judah placed Asherah in the temple, and most scholars believe that it stayed there. This image of Asherah stayed there until King Josiah removed it from here in 2 Kings 23, 6 and 7. What is interesting about that is that it looks like there was an image of Asherah in the Jewish temple for quite a few decades, quite a long time, maybe 40 years. Wow, long time, you know. As far as archaeological evidence is concerned, we find the worship of that. We find that there are standing stones that have inscriptions, as well as other places that mention the name Yahweh and his Asherah. So we have here that Asherah can also be understood as the wife of Yahweh, as well as El. There are other inscriptions that invoke Yahweh along with El and Baal and Asherah. One declares, I'll just read a few, why not? Yahweh of Samaria and his Asherah. Another says Yahweh of Timon and his Asherah. Her worship was also evident in Arabia, where there is a standing stone precisely dated to 549 BCE, which has an Aramaic inscription discussing Psalm of Mahram, and talks about Asherah in connection to that. So, wow. So, yeah, there you have it. Now, I'll say this. There is a point of controversy where there was an Ur that was discovered at Lachish and has an image of a 7-branch tree that dates from the 13th century BCE. And most agree that this is an image of Asherah. But it's a tree, it's an idealized tree. And I wish I had a pen on me, but I'll just draw it out. So you have the stem, and then it goes like this. Zoop. It has 7 branches. It looks very close to menorah. Very close to menorah image. A lot of people are thinking, is a menorah connected to the idealized tree of Asherah? This has been part of the conversation going back and forth. Whether you agree or disagree, that's not the point. This is just part of the conversation. And that the menorah is connected to an earlier tradition. Of course, Baal and Asherah were often sat together, put together. Judges 6:25 tells how Gideon was commanded to pull down the altar of Baal, which your father has, and cut down the Asherah that is beside it. Of course, graven images in general were forbidden, as noted by Jeremiah 2:27, which declares, "Who says to a tree, 'You are my father,' and to a stone, 'You gave me birth'?" What is noted by many scholars is the reversal of roles, for the tree is connected with the goddess, while the stone is often connected with the more masculine. So, there's some interesting things going on there. And woe to him who says to a wooden thing, 'Awake,' to a dumb stone, 'Arise.' Can this give revelation? And so forth. Now it appears that there's an evolution here, but I want to mention this one more thing. Asherah is connected to mountain too. You guys ever heard of the Mount of Olives? So as it turns out, the first mention of the Mount of Olives, there is, of course, a connection in 2 Samuel when David is fleeing Absalom. David went up to the ascent of the Mount of Olives. He went up, found refuge here. But this became the place for when King Solomon had as many wives, and for 4 wives who worshiped various gods. This was the site where they worshiped, specifically on the southern slope. We also find evidence that Asherah was also worshipped on the southern slope of the Mount of Olives, which is interesting because there's an olive grove there that was considered sacred. So sacred, in fact, that it's from that olive grove that they pressed the olive oil for the Jewish temple. So, even after after the Hashemites, after the Maccabean revolt, after the Hasmoneans, the Maccabean revolt, you have, of course, have the situation where there's not enough oil so it takes a little while to make it. Well, that oil that was being fixed so that it could be, after 8 days, was from that same area. So there you have it. So it is also mentioned that Asherah in 2 Kings 23, 6 or 7, these poles were clothed in certain ways. And so there you have it. Okay, so I'm going to close up, but I do want to refer to two more quickly. Otherwise, you won't be happy with me. And I got to mention, quickly, I'll mention Dagon, and quickly, I'll mention Yamm, because I need to mention Yamm. Dagon, he was a grain deity, also connected with fish. In fact, his name probably means grain itself. He's first mentioned in 2500 BCE in the Mari text. Dagon was worshipped by the Amorites and those of the people of Ebla and Ugarat, and by many Philistines. Dagon was, in many cases, the head of quite a few pantheons amongst the Syrians. So there you have it. Of course, there is the story of the Ark of the Covenant. If you're familiar, 1 Samuel 5, 2 through 7, when the Ark of the Covenant was captured by the Philistines and taken to Dagon's temple in Ashdod. This is the Gaza Strip. The following morning, they found the image of Dagon lying prostrate before the Ark. They set the image upright, but again, on the morning of the following day, they found prostrate before the Ark, this time with the head and hands severed, lying on what's called a mikton, which means either threshold or podium. And so there you have it. And so Dagon is connected there. Yamm, who's the god of the sea, who is very much part of the primordial chaos, always raging behind various storms, causing disasters. He was also known as the Judge Nahar, or Judge River, right? He is also one of the Elohim, or the sons of El, and so he is also known as the Leviathan. It's interesting because the part of the root of the name Yamm, we find variations of that as Yah, which sounds a little bit like Yahweh. And there is a lot in the way of a contest between Yamm and Baal, which is fascinating because you're going to have a contest between Yahweh and Baal, as we see with Elijah on Mount Carmel. So there it is. Now there is a story because he's known for his chaotic ways. The Canaanites told one story where he was thrown off the sacred mountain of Athirat, the one we just mentioned, of Mount North. So the story is Baal, Hadad, and Yamm were immortal enemies, with the Baal epic having one story telling how Yamm wished to take Baal Hadad's place as the king of heaven. But in the ensuing fight, both kill one another, and both are in turn resurrected. The battle between Yamm and Baal Hadad we have equivalents in other stories like the Tiamat and Abzu amongst the Mesopotamians, and as well as the Hittite serpent Yoyankas and the sky god Tesheb. How about Typhon and Zeus? Lots of connections here and there. The seven-headed dragon Lapan is associated closely with him and Yamm. In fact, they are both described as the serpent, right? So there you have it. Lapan is sometimes understood as the servant of the serpent. Now, wow, I do have also one more. You do also have Mot, who was the god of the underworld and death. So Mot lives in the city known as Myri, having a pit as his throne, and filth, it is said, is the land of the heritage. But Baal Hadad warns them that you shall not come near to divine death, lest he made you like a lamb in his mouth, and you both be carried away like a kid in the breach of his windpipe. According to Habakkuk and Job, the Hebrew word for death Malkuth is sometimes personified not as a god, but as a devil or the angel of death, and has certain connections to the word Mot. There is a Phoenician account that survives in a paraphrase by the Greek author Philo of Byblos by Eusebius, who writes of a Phoenician historian, tells about account of the death, that the death is the son of El. He is counted as a god, and it says, El, and not long afterwards, he consecrated after his death another of his sons called Muth, whom he had by Rhea. This Muth, the Phoenicians esteem, is the same as Thanatos, death, as well as Pluto or Hades. So Mod is connected with Hades in this case. There is also stories of philosophical perspectives that Mot was produced out of mud, but that he was connected to the water compound, and that from it is a germ of creation and the generation of the universe. So you have him connected to death, but also resurrection and life and mud. Mot was also understood as the dragon from under the earth, and he ruled a great dark kingdom of death. He was said to have a tail of a scorpion. In fact, the name Mot, as I said, does mean death. So picture Mot, this dragon from under the earth, and he has this great stinger. Well, remember, Mot was still being worshipped even into the 1st century CE. And so it's interesting because Mot is known to have this great giant mouth, as I just read to you, that swallows up the living. Now get this, you have the Apostle Paul, that talks about the fact that the last enemy that will be abolished is death, but he also talks about maybe it's stinger, because he states that death will be swallowed up in victory, but he also asks, "O death, where is your sting?" So those who are reading this will go, "Oh, of course, this is referring, in a sense, to Mot." And of course, you have this also in Isaiah. You have the idea that God will swallow up death forever. So it's the idea of the reversal concept, right? That as death swallows up those who are living, God is going to swallow up death itself. I think that's rather interesting. So that is Mot, the god of the underworld, the god of death. And then, of course, you have Anat. She's the war goddess, rather violent. And this will be the last one. Anat. She's sometimes understood as the sister of Baal-Hadad, and sometimes understood as his lover as well. She's very fierce. She's a wild warrior in battle. She's oftentimes, yes, walking through blood, and she cuts off people's heads. She cuts off the hands, and she takes these heads and she ties it to her torso, and she takes the hands and makes it into a sash, and she drives out the old men and townfolk with her arrows. And she does all this. Unlike Sekhmet, unlike Kali, she does this with her heart full of joy. So she does. Is pretty. She looks like Kali. She looks like Sekhmet in many ways, but there is a very big difference. There, of course, are so many other gods and goddesses in connection to Canaanite religion. So many, too many. But I think I gave you some of the most important ones, as well as providing a historical context, understanding Canaanite religion. And you can see how some of these ideas not only go into Judaism, but also go into Christianity as well. So thank you so much, and have a great night.
Wow, that was excellent.
So just a little bit of material.
Just a little bit.
Oh,
It's like 10 o'clock.
I know. And I have, I
You
won't
had
even tell
so
you.
much material though. You just like,
Yeah, and I'll have to tell you, I got halfway through.
wow. So there's a whole nother lecture in there, huh?
But part of it's pretty great, is that I have a whole bunch of inscriptions that I have here that goes into some of the pronouncements and some of the stories. Yeah, it's pretty great. It's pretty fun. I have the whole story of the battle between Baal and Yamm written out, and how they duke it out. So that's pretty fun. But any questions? Did I answer all the questions?
Must have.
Have I done it?
Nothing in the chat about a question either.
No. Yeah. So, well, what I could do is what I could do just for fun is I'll put this as just for your own entertainment. Maybe I'll read a little bit of some of the script. Would you like that? Would that be okay? Would you be interested in that?
Yeah.
I know we'll lose people, but I think it still would be kind of fun right there. So, okay, so I'll go here. Just, this will be reading time with Dr. Rietveldt of primary source texts. And let's see, I'll find a good place here. All right, here it is. I will go on. Okay, so, okay, let's see. Actually, yeah, okay. There are the dwellings of El, the shelter of his sons, the dwelling of Lady Asherah of the sea, the dwelling of the renowned brides, the dwelling of Pidre, girl of light, the shelter of Tele, girl of rain, the dwelling of Arse, girl of Yadar. Also sometimes else I'll tell thee, go to, beseech Lady Asherah of the sea, entreat the creatrix of the gods. The skilled one goes up to the bellows in the hands of Casus. That's kind of the forger deity connected to the Canaanites. In the hands of Casus are the tongs. He pours silver. He casts gold. He pours silver by thousands of shekels. Gold he pours by myriads. A glorious crown studded with silver, adorned with red gold, a glorious throne, a dais above a glorious footstool, which glistens in purity, glorious shoes of reception. Thereover he brings them gold, this forger deity. A glorious table that is full, a glorious bowl, fine works of Camarus, set like the realm of Yamm, in which there are buffaloes of myriads. Then it goes on. Cathar Ucasus goes to the Lady Asherah of the sea, mother of the 70 gods, and he offers these gifts to her. And of course, he lists the gifts. He adorns her with the covering of her flesh. She tears her clothing. On the second day, he adorns her in the two rivers. She sets a pot on the fire, a vessel on the top of coals. She perpetuates the bull, God of mercy, entreats the creator of the creatures on lifting her eyes, and then she sees. And then the text cuts off. There's more, but it's beautiful. They besought Lady Asherah of the sea, yea, entreated the creature of the gods. And it goes on and on. But it's really beautiful. And it goes on for about 10 more pages. But there's a break in one part. But we have a lot that has survived. You get the idea, right? My question is, how come we don't know any of this? How come this is not talked about? We have too much. We have so much. You would think even for biblical studies, this would be like, a class. You could teach a whole class on just Canaanite religion because there's so much in the way of archaeology, so much in the way of texts.
It's the wrong God, though.
Right.
Well, not only that, but like you were saying at the beginning, that vilify people for their beliefs.
Yep.
Remember when you said that, Maggie? It's all about war and control. But the amazing thing is that we are all of the same people. And I just bless you for bringing this to us. You really enlightened me. And I wish that you could enlighten the world.
What Margie had to say?
Sorry?
Not say anything.
Well, the conversation at the beginning, remember?
Oh, okay. Oh, you mean about LaTorra and all of that?
Yeah, she before we even started the class, she was talking about how war, you have to vilify somebody.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
You have to make them not human.
Mm-hmm.
And this all connects us. Could you imagine if everybody believed that we were all connected and how amazing it would be?
Mm-hmm.
And but there is fight in there. There's money in religion. There's money. Yes. Okay. Yeah. And if you don't come to me and spend your tithing here, we don't educate people. We don't want you to know the truth. We don't want you to know that that we're all connected, because how could we separate us?
Well, in order for my religion to be the correct one, all of yours have to be wrong. So
there is no correct one, though.
That's what I think. I think all of them are a little bit right, but in order for me to be on top, you have to be lower than, and I think that's a huge problem.
Exactly. But that's the struggle of man.
It
We've
is.
been doing that forever.
For thousands of years. Obviously, like from the lecture tonight, we can see thousands of years we've been battling this tendency, and we still haven't learned.
Thank you, James, for enlightening us. I mean, you are so amazing. What a wonderful lecture.
And thank you, Margie, for giving such a wonderful context. So I'm glad you brought it up, because it wasn't recorded. So now it lasts for posterity. So you keep this in, Margie.
Okay. All right. We'll do.
My request. So
all right.
That would be good.
Yes. Yes. You know that this all goes up on YouTube.
Yep. That's good.
Probably, early next week or something. I try and get them up fast, but it will be up on YouTube for posterity. Yeah.
So your words of wisdom are there as well. Yeah. No. Maybe we should do an Ugarat ritual and all divide up and have the 3 women and 3 men, right? And divide it all up and do a ritual of concord and bring everybody together. I love that ritual, though. I think it's a great idea. It is.
I'm in. That's wonderful. I'll be at your next lecture. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for being here.
Okay, so 2 weeks from tonight, it's the medieval female mystics, right?
That's what we're doing. Medieval female mystics. We're going there. Yeah, and as a closing note, I will just say the answer to a better answer to the question. I threw it out there. Here's the situation, and you're right, Patty. What happens is that people don't want to understand the full picture of what's going on in Canaan. Diversity that's there.
Mm-hmm.
And as a result, we lose the context of not only the Canaanites, but we lose the context of ancient Judaism.
Of humanity.
But we lost. And We got to see these things coming together. We need to understand that the El was worshipped by the Canaanites, but they're also worshipped by the Israelites. You know, it's the same God. You know, and Allah is Allah. So I mean, you have
Right, and that's what I was gonna say. I loved how you connected it to Allah. I
Yeah.
mean, and it's out there. We don't educate people. We educate people in binary. We
Yeah.
don't educate people really for all the things to think for themselves or to explore. We
Think
don't.
for yourself and question authority.
I just think you're wonderful. And you came into my life at a brilliant time. I am so blessed to be here. Thank you, Terry. Thank you, Maggie. Thank you, everybody that was here.
Thank you so much.
Blessings.
Well, I'm glad you could join us. We'll look forward to seeing you again.
Absolutely.
I
It'd be
know.
wonderful to have you again. Right.
I put in the chat all the forthcoming events for this month.
Right. Thank you,
including the
Jess, for
next
being here
lecture.
too. So there we go.